Hey guys, it's the Conic, and in this one I want to quickly go over my league start plans for Phrecia, the POBs. I currently have 2 POBs made out for low and high budget and everything, and I will be probably making one for medium budget as I progress through Phrecia and actually see the things I want to gradually upgrade into before the high budget. But in this one we're going to be covering everything you need to know about the build and how we scale it basically. So starting off, what exactly is this build? This is going to be very similar to the Summon Phantasm build I made for Keepers of the Flame. So if you played that, this is going to be a very similar scaling vector to that, I think. But that being said, we are opting for a lot of differences because ascendancies are different. We're able to get different bonuses and stuff like that. So in the current variant, this is what the high budget looks like. As you can see, it's a very defensive setup. It has 11k ES, it has 14k armor without any flask setup going on right now. So when you have your flask up, I think it goes up to like 28k. Without flasks, we are able to get very zoomy as well. We're 83% movement speed without any flasks, and this is while channeling Cyclone, because if you didn't know, Cyclone has a less movement speed multiplier. So if you were to stop channeling Cyclone because you're max minions or something, you actually have 129, and then if you throw Quicksilver on top of that, you're now looking at like 180 something, 182. So very zoomy setup, which is one of the biggest reasons why I opted to go Scavenger. There are 2 ascendancies I see being played with Summon Phantasms in Phrecia very easily. That is Scavenger, and your second option would be Servant of Arakali. And this is because we're going poison, so it scales very well with the ascendancy. You just get some of the things for absolutely free, just by virtue of being Servant of Arakali. So if you want to think of a Servant of Arakali and Scavenger difference, it's Scavenger is a lot more defensively solid, while Servant of Arakali would do more damage. So it's up to you if you want to try to push a Servant of Arakali version. I might dabble in a POB for Servant of Arakali and see what I can cook up in terms of defenses on that, and see if it's overall worth it more so than Scavenger. But I very much like the Scavenger variant. One of the big reasons Scavenger is now really on the menu for minion builds versus original Phrecia is because there has never really been a good 4th ascendancy for Scavenger. It's really just been Midnight Bargain, Cloak of Flame, or Chevron's Wrapping, depending on what you're going for. And there's nothing here minion builds typically would care about. And you can't get here if you go for the top side, and you're always going for Midnight Bargain on this ascendancy. So it was always awkward. But now with the introduction of stuff like Bloodlines, we're not able to get our 4th ascendancy from other sources, and in this case we are opting for Umbral Army. This is why the build is going to be as zoomy as it is, because we are getting access to movement speed per Summon Phantasm, and this gives us extra 3 Summon Phantasms, which we double with our Dark Monarch armor to get 6, which ends up being equivalent to 12% movement speed compared to the non-Phrecia Summon Phantasm setup. But anyways, that is it for ascendancies. We are basically going to be getting 2 passive points for our first ascendancy. Our second ascendancy, we're going for the free Cloak of Flame because it's a lot of physical mitigation. And then for the third ascendancy, we're going Midnight Bargain for the extra Phantasm. And then finally, we opt for Umbral Army as our last choice. Now, one big reason why we scale, or how we scale this, is we are basically aura stacking on this setup. It shouldn't be too expensive, but we do use 35% effect reservation clusters, and the reason for this is we want to get as many auras as we can fit in, because we need all the resistances we can get. We are currently CI, but we have opted for a full defensive package using Bone Meld as the core of my defense. Because I have 50 Phantasms, that means I'm able to get 200% increased defenses from this amulet, which is insane. However, it also means I end up getting minus 100 to all resistances as well, which means if I were to unclick CI, I have to figure out Chaos Res, which is just way too much res pressure. So we click CI so we can ignore Chaos Res. We also opt for, as you can see, all the purities. This gives us 81 max res and a whole lot of elemental resistances, and allows us to get away with still using a Dark Monarch and a Command of the Pit, and still have enough resistances and attributes to use everything we need to use to get to where we're at currently. But anyways, so we have Purity of Element, Fire, Ice, Lightning, and Malevolence as our auras. If you want to be a bit more defensively solid, you can switch Malevolence for Determination, up to you. For our main gem weapon setup, we're going to be using Summon Phantasm and then all these gems. These two are going to be swaps, and the way swaps work on this build is you're going to have two different soul rests. You're going to have one in your main hand and one in your offhand slot, and all you're going to do is you're going to weapon swap. Your offhand is going to have your, let's say, single target setup, and your main hand is going to have your, or your weapon set one is going to have your fast up, is going to have your clear setup. So once you've cleared your map, you have everything, you just press your weapon swap button, and all of a sudden your minions swap to their, you know, DPS setup, if you will, and you don't even have to worry about getting white sockets or anything like that. It's just the very, very comfy playstyle where you literally just press a button to gem swap instead of having to like go into your inventory or anything like that. Just make sure your Summon Phantasm support gem is in the same sockets on both sides. I would say I haven't tested this to know that this is mandatory, but I would imagine this is mandatory. Now, how do we fit in all these auras, including discipline, by the way? How do we fit in so many auras onto this setup? Well, we are going for a bunch of different things. We are opting for all the wheels we have easy access to for reservation. So aura wheel here, aura wheel here, aura wheel here. All of these end up giving us a decent amount of reservation, but that's not even nearly enough. So we're also using a treachery. This makes it so our auras affect enemies, but with the auras we have, it doesn't really affect our damage or anything. And the reason for this is the only thing that affects us in any way, shape, or form is giving them Purity of Elements, because that gives them elemental ailment immunity. And that matters because we actually do shock, but it's not worth not having the Purity of Element aura. So we'll just take that on the chin and move on with it. Now, why we don't care about giving them resistances is because we are mostly going to be doing poison damage. So we're doing physical and we're doing chaos damage, and we are using Command of the Pit to give our minions a 25% chance on hits with spells, which for Summon Phantasms use spells. So they would be getting Unholy Might, and then Unholy Might means Wither and 100% conversion to Chaos. So this wouldn't be available 100% of the time with every single Summon Phantasm, but with how many Summon Phantasms we're going to have, as well as how frequently they're going to be hitting, I think this POB has them hitting almost twice a second, if not more. 3 times a second, actually, almost. So in just a bit over a second from summon, the Summon Phantasm is going to be able to gain this on average. So we'll have enough Summon Phantasms to apply 15 Wither. We'll have enough Summon Phantasms to, even if they don't get it, it's still, physical damage still contributes to poison, so our DPS is just fine anyways. Then we're also going to be wearing a Despair, so you know, poison does chaos damage, reducing enemy chaos res is very good for it. And we're using a Vowed Discipline. While Vowed Discipline is insane for this setup is because it makes it so your ES recharge cannot be interrupted. And if you notice, or if you look over here, we have an ES recharge of 8.5k per second of 11k. So the moment we click Vowed Discipline for any defense check, unless we get one shot, we are not dying for the duration of Vowed Discipline. And the reason we're able to get that high is because of, again, a few different interactions going into place. But the TLDR is Bone Melt gives us a whole lot of increased defenses. That includes increased armor, and that makes it so this mastery over here, which increases the reductions to armor applied to ES recharge rate, that makes it so that is very, very, that gives us a whole lot of energy shield recharge rate essentially. So recharge rate is going to be really, really good, and defenses on the Vowed Discipline is going to be very, very good as a result. Now for how you're going to actually play this build, you're going to be just holding Cyclone to cast Desecrate and Flesh Offering. This will summon your Phantasms, and you just keep doing this essentially. You don't have to worry too much about your Phantasms defenses because they're capped on all resistances except Chaos, but your Chaos res would typically be minus because ours is so far deep into the negatives, which is why we opt for giving them some Chaos res over here. With this wheel, they get some Chaos res. So your key stretch is not necessarily in the negatives. It's not too deep in the positives either. But this paired with the mastery that gives them 5% of life on minion death, and the simple fact that replacing your phantasms also counts as them dying, means they should not have any survivability issues essentially. Then we have one extra support gem or socket here. We just use portal in there. I might figure out something I want to use here. I was going to use leap slam, but we do not take spiritual command node, so it's going to feel very, very bad to leap slam without minion attack speed affecting us. And then for our items, we're going for soul rest. Like I said, this is the staff. This is core to the build. The soul rest staff allows us to summon up to 22, or in this case 25, with the Ascendancy summon Phantasm, because it gives us a summon Phantasm skill, which then can be supported with summon Phantasm support, which would increase the max of summon Phantasms we have. So the TLDR is, with this staff, we go from having 10 to having 22 summon Phantasm. It's always very cheap if it's available, and you don't even need to have this linked. You can just have it like having a 6 socket item and you're good to go. Then we're going to be using a Dark Monarch. Again, another boss. This is a boss drop, so it wouldn't be available to you day one, but the low budget version doesn't use this, and it turns out just fine on damage. I can tell you that much on literally no budget. Then more mana reservation coming from here. Because we go for command of the pit, we opt for 2 abyssal sockets, because it can roll with 2 abyssal sockets, and then in those sockets we're basically just going to be putting poison chance, and then hybrid damage, chaos, physical damage. You can also opt for any one of these damage types beside energy shield. That's also an option that's available to you. They aren't mandatory. If you get rid of literally one of these mods, you're going to end up with like 2 mil less damage, and these are T3 mods, so you can also just get way more. But the important stat here is 1 flat and poison chance. You need the poison chance, so just keep that in mind. You want to get 100% chance to poison from your Ghastly Eye Jewels, and we have more than enough slots for our Ghastly Eye Jewels to do that. Then we're opting for your ES boots with movement speed, res, basically decently easy to craft. I need to add implicit. I haven't done that. I'll do that before posting the this video. Bone ring, very, very straightforward. Just minion damage, attack speed, attributes, res, repeats. Then for the darkness enthroned, it's going to be the same Ghastly Eye Jewel in there. We're opting for Rumi's Concoction as our flask because it gives us block chance, and block chance is very, very nice. Basalt Flask with regen to give us even more regen. We're opting for Zealot's Oath to make sure our life regen applies to ES, and as a result, percent life ES is based on percent ES, which is very, very strong. Jade Flask because we don't get too high in the way of block, but we get so much increased defenses that with just having a Jade Flask, we end up getting to 44% evade chance, which is quite nutty to have on top of block and on top of other defensive players. So again, this build is very, very tanky. I have to stress that the high budget is very tanky. And we opt for a Quicksilver with movement speed, and then a Quartz Flask for phasing. And then for our grafts, we are going for double minion damage grafts. We're so tanky, we don't really care for the Zoff graft, I believe. The Molten Shell one, we don't care too much for it. But we're opting for, and the only modifier that really matters, minion damage. We're getting as high of the minion damage as we can. For glowing silhouettes, because we give our enemies ailment immunity, we can't rely on it for shock, which means we only care about damage. And then for Jotun, same thing, just another edgecraft that can roll minion damage. I don't think you can get any of these with damage and minion attack speed, but I'm pretty sure those are exclusive modifiers or mutually exclusive, where if you have one, you can't get the other. But if you somehow can, then you want to also add attack speed to the mix. We opt for a light of meaning with ES. This is going to be on the more expensive side because, again, high budget. However, for a budget setup, you can always go for increased armor instead, because we do scale a fair amount of armor That would make it so your elemental max it goes down a bit, but your physical max it stays about the same or even goes slightly higher. And of course, because all of that would be increased armor, your ES recharge rate goes up even more. So then your recharge is just even better. We're opting for two 35% effect, 3% minion attack speed clusters as a big chunk of our offensive scaling. This is where we get a lot of our increased minion damage. So these two, I would say, are where the bulk of the budget for this setup is actually residing. That and Light of Meaning. So with that, we're able to get a lot of minion damage, minion attack speed, and we're all going for all 12 sockets on both of them. Then we have Enduring Composure for endurance charge scaling. We get up to 5 endurance charges with, well, we get up to 4. We don't go for the 5th one. And then Immutable Force for stun immunity, because we are not going to be getting any chance to, any other sources of stun immunity. Actually, that means I can get rid of that guy and go for 10% less physical damage while on ES or something else along that line. I'll probably pick a different mastery or go for a rune graft. I'll think a bit more about it after I'm done recording. And then, like we said, all we're going for our small cluster jewels is 35% effect on reservation. So you can literally just alt spam this until you get it. If you want that with ES like it's here, you just want it to reforge defense until you get ES and effects. But I think if you reforge defense, you can get any of the defenses. So alt spamming while on a budget is probably the way to go, and then you can try your best later on when you have a bit more budget, if you will. We're opting for a Watcher's Eye that has chance to block spell damage. I see physical damage mitigation while you have determination, and this is actually BIS if you run determination. But if you don't, like this POB suggests, I'll have to figure out what the good replacement modifier is. That probably isn't discipline as well, because that would raise the price. But it might just be double discipline Watcher's Eye. Actually, it might be discipline clarity, because we do want as much mana regen as possible to make the playstyle a bit more comfy when possible. Amanamos for minion dot multi for the poison, and then just more ghastly eye jewels for the Amanamo and for poison chance and flat damage, yada yada yada. And then another small cluster jewel, and that sums up the items, the skills. And then the tree is very straightforward. It's literally a decent scion tree. We get the tree cluster jewel or jewel sockets we spawn near. We go for ES here. And then we're using Light of Meaning here because we take we take a lot of nodes in this vicinity, and we're able to get a bit more res here and still get a bit more ES. So this is just a very high value Light of Meaning spot. But you can also replace Light of Meaning with, there's other jewels that can take that space if you really want. So you can even just replace it with a ghastly eye jewel if you need it. But I prefer the defensive boost that is having the Light of Meaning there. A few more things to note before we wrap up this video is on the increased defenses side, we get Fortress, which reduces attributes. If you're struggling on attributes, don't take Fortress. That stands to reason. We're also opting for Treachery. Early on, we don't want to actually use Treachery because the low budget version of this build actually opts for lightning damage as our main damage source instead of poison until we eventually make the swap to poison. So you don't want Treachery too early either. And then let's just go over very quickly the low budget version. And for context, if you're wondering if there is a leveling version, there isn't. However, the POB I made for a leveling version for someone Phantasms for Keepers of the Flame, for I believe it was The Witch, you can still use that same setup. The only difference is you are now a Scion. So some of those gems you would have access to might either have to be milled or you have to wait for Sayosa in Act 3. But for the most part, you should be fine leveling as a Scion, I would say. And in the worst case scenario, you get a friend who is starting as some witch to get you the gems. Anyways, like I said, on this version, we're opting for a 4 blue Triads grip so that we can convert all our minions damage to lightning. And we are also going for a double damage 6 link setup. So we're opting for, the soul rest with summon phantasms with these two as our swaps, replacing these two whenever you want to single target versus wave clear. But then we also have our chest piece using skeletons and raised zombies with a damage setup. I don't think we're going to need to use melee splash because of summon phantasm should be doing enough damage, but just out there. And because we are scavenger, we get very high value from using many minions, because again, Midnight Bargain doesn't only give plus max phantasms, it gives you max Spectre, so we can have one extra support Spectre, we can have 2 extra zombies which are DPS, we can have 3 extra skeletons, and of course we still have Val summon skeletons available to us. So very, very high value from Midnight Bargain in this Zoomancer-esque playstyle. We are also opting for Purple Toe for early lucky damage, and for our chest piece we're using volatility to really juice the need for that lucky damage and increase our DPS output. And as you can see, we're sitting at 3.8 mil damage with basically no investment. This is a soul rest that's going to be cheap on start, and this is one mod items where all you're looking for is life and res. Here, level of all minion skills is nice to have because it buffs the damage on your skeletons and your zombies. However, it's not mandatory because it doesn't even affect your summon phantasms, example. And then just life res on all your gears here. We get some physical damage you fire from the Eldritch Implicit. That is fine. If you cannot afford to do it early on, don't do it. It is a luxury rather than a mandatory thing. And then using a 60-something% Darkness Enthroned because we are still going to be broke at this point. And again, just all life and res. And then for our jewel sockets, we're opting for just flat lightning. That's all. We just care about flat lightning on every single one. So flat lightning, and all these. And something important to note is we're going to be going for Blessed Rebirth. This allows your summon phantasms and your skeletons to live for a minimum of 4 seconds. So when you cast Val summon skeletons, your minions actually will last minimum 4 seconds before they start dying off. But we do still have access to minions recover life on minion death, which should help sustain them even further past that. And if you want to make this cluster jewel, you literally just need a medium cluster jewel and just reforge life. It just needs to be level 4. Alt spam, reforge life, they both work. And then for the skill section, like I said, we're doing this and we're going for summon phantasms, but we're also going for support specters with Feeding Frenzy. And for the specters in question, we're going to be going for double. We have 4 specters. We're going to be going for 2 Carnage Chieftains for frenzy charges, and then we're also going to be opting for Pale Seraphim, which does enemy increased damage taken. So very, very nice. And then as a fort, we have a few options for the fort, but I'm thinking we go Primal Rex Matriarch because that applies a debuff to enemies, which is increased lightning damage taken. But ultimately, these are all temporary specters that you're going to get rid of eventually, so we're not going to be thinking too hard about them. And then for Cyclone is the same setup we had, just Cyclone, Cast Fire, Channeling, Desecrate, and Flesh Offering. And then for Auras, we're going for Wrath, Purity of Elements, and then Clarity because we want as much mana regen as we can get. And of course, Convocation. But that about sums up the low budget as well. And then for leveling, like I said, on the build sheet, you should see Summon Phantasm under 3.27. I can actually show you real quick. If you look on that Summon Phantasm, you'll see this leveling POB. You can just go ahead and click that, and you can essentially follow this, and you should have a swell time as well. Only difference, like I said, might be the gem section. So if I have the time, I might make a tweak for this specifically for Scion, so we have a more accurate understanding of what the gems were picking up early on are and all of that jazz. Well, we'll see how it goes in any case. All right, that about sums up the build. Let me know if you have any questions in the comment section below. I'm going to be starting this, like I said, so come 3 o'clock today, which is when Phrecia launches for me, I'm going to be blasting. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comment section or my stream. Either works for me. If you like the content, do consider liking and subscribing as it helps out the channel a lot. And with all that said, thank you for watching.